distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, friends and enemies.
Okay, welcome to this week's podcast. Thanks for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, thanks for watching. Please do like, subscribe, do all the things. Does help. Give us feedback. Also, if you want to jump and give us any comments, you got Make It Plain is on Twitter or on Insta. Those kind of places, please do get in touch. All right, so this week we actually have an interview with Nels Abbey. I spoke to Nels last series. You might remember Nels Abbey writes for The Guardian, wrote a great book called Think Like a White Man, also has a book out, The Hip Hop MBA as well. What's that now? And me and Nels were talking because we went to the trial of Maria Hussein. You would have seen me talk about this or heard me talk about this in the podcast. Maria was the person who was charged with having the, because she had a picture of Rishi Sunak and Suella Braverman as with coconuts on it. And she's the woman who was charged for this nonsense, totally ludicrous trial. I went down to the 2 days of the trial. There was a protest down there. So actually, after the intro, we're going to play my speech from the protest. And then we're also going to, me and Nels jumped on the live straight away, got our quick reactions. What happened? What was, I mean, honestly, that case was a joke. I won't go into it now because we're going to have more of the, in the video. But honestly, no evidence, no witnesses, nothing from the, it was embarrassing to see, honestly embarrassing, and a waste of anybody who lives in the UK. That's your tax money. That's your money they're pouring down the drain on this absolute nonsense. So yeah, glad that she won. 9 months pregnant. It was so horrible to see her in the court. It was very clear she was really quite nervous and getting quite upset, as you would, right? Livelihood on the line, already lost her job as well. So congratulations to Maria Hussein. Very happy that she's off. But I will stress, this is not, I didn't leave that court going, this is a great victory. I left that was what Malcolm would call a circus with clowns and all. Big red shiny noses, a big frizzy cloth with massive feet clown driving around in clown cars in that it was so utterly ludicrous. I don't even know what to say. And next week I have to go in to have my own police interview for calling Calvin Robertson a house Negro. The world has gone, no, take this back. The world has not gone mad. It is just always been mad. As from last week, I did a bit of an explainer about this. So if you haven't watched that or listened to that, please do check out last week's podcast, because I do try to put in context that actually these charges aren't by accident. This really is what that law has been always used to do, policing us. All right. Anyway, so big congratulations to Maria. But we have to keep fighting. There's more cases coming. They're not going to stop. We have to try as a community, really, really push back on this. All right. So yeah, after the break, then, and have a speech from me, and you're going to have the live that me and Nels did right afterwards. So yeah. What did I want to do today? I wanted to have a rant. I've been promising this for like 2 weeks, based on my eldest son, Kadiri, who edits the videos, going to secondary school, and last year having to look around at secondary schools. The teaser I gave for this was forget the school to prison pipelines. The schools are now just prisons. And actually thinking about prisons and thinking about the news right now, does seem I should mention just a little bit about Diddy, who's finally been arrested. Hopefully going to prison for a very long time, but seems like there's a lot. When there's so much smoke, there has to be a little bit of fire. Like, it just has to be. I don't know. He got all that smoke. There's no way there ain't some fire. Ain't some fire there. And we already seen a video of him viciously attacking Cassie. I don't want to go into this too much now. Like, as it unfolds, we'll I'm sure I will talk about it at some point. But just a reminder that, I mean, somebody asked me. We do actually, I did talk about this on an interview we got coming up. Buseo Twins, who is really good activist, does political work, has reels on Instagram looking at political ideas. We actually did chop it up a little bit about this for next week. I think it'll be next week's podcast. Yeah. And so I won't go into it too much now, but just to say, look, we have to be careful who we idolize. Like, Diddy was problematic. Take away the sex abuse. Take away the trafficking. It's still problematic. We celebrate the wrong people. You celebrate the wrong people, this is what happens. Anyway, so hopefully get some justice And particularly, I mean, can you get justice in the courts of anybody? Probably not. Can you get justice in the courts of black people? Can you get justice in the courts of black women? Yo, I'm going to leave that there. Anyway, talking about prison, talking about rants, couldn't not mention it. Definitely couldn't not mention it. But the rant this week, actually, like I said, school to prison pipeline, forget the school to prison pipeline, the schools are just prisons. And what I meant by this is, again, you have to talk sometimes about metaphor, right? Because people take things literally, right? Like you say a metaphor and people are like, well, that's not exactly, but okay, shut up. Obviously, the schools are not actually prisons. You don't actually get locked up from day to day. So metaphorically, but more than metaphorically, actually. So I share an experience. I went around, when you're a parent, you have to go around, obviously, with your kids looking for the best schools, etc., etc., etc. You know, I'm very much someone who doesn't believe in private schools. I mean, I know they exist. I'm not saying I don't believe they exist. They definitely exist. But I would not send my child to a private school, even if I could afford it. Maybe I can afford it, but it wouldn't really be the thing that crossed my mind. The idea that we should pay for education. It's not even education. You're not getting education in these places. You're getting schooling. So you want me to pay £10,000 a term, £9,000 a term, £5,000 a term for my kid to be indoctrinated into Western society? Okay, nah, they can do that one for free. So yeah, but I'm not the one sending back into private school. Also, I'm not really a big grammar school person, I'll be honest. And in Birmingham, where I live, all the grammar schools, they're single sex. I haven't really been like on a single sex thing. I don't know. I just think you should mix. For me, it's really important that you go to school, you just see regular people, you mix with regular people. I don't know. It seems like a really important principle for school. It's mostly about socialization, not about what they learn. Then it should be about just mix with regular people, right? So anyway, my son didn't want to do 11 plus anyway, and I wasn't going to push him into it. So the school choices are pretty limited once you take off that. But we went around and saw a couple of schools, and there's a school that's near me. I won't name the school. I won't name the school, but if you know Birmingham, you probably guess which school it is. It's a new building, new school. Went in, going to the school. First thing you think about, it's like a new building, brand new, like purpose-built school. You go into like a box, like a proper box. Like there's just no space. You go in there, it's gloomy. It's just like, what is this? Like just no space, physically no space. Like, you go in there, it's just really, really small, packed in, condensed, right? Walking around the school, it's just, there's like these old schools, like my old school and the school he actually goes to, loads of space, massive grounds, and kids running around. Like, there's a lot of space. This is boxed in, like a box, right? Going, the first thing I noticed is the cafeteria. The cafeteria, I don't know if you ever watched prison movies, and I've been to, and I've taught in prisons, so I've been into prisons, and you see the cafeteria, it honestly looked like a prison cafeteria. It's like, wow, this actually, I don't know if it's modeled on it, but it just had that, straight away the vibe was, it's like a prison cafe. What is going on? This is like, honestly, I was kind of a bit like, okay. Then start talking to the people in the school, and it become one of the teaching assistants actually recognized, somebody who worked in the school recognized me and started talking to me and was like, oh, school's got a reputation of being quite strict. So this is a school where you'll get, 30-minute, if you haven't got a pencil, 30-minute detention. If you on top, 30-minute detention. All these detentions, infractions for all these various things you can get if you're in the school, which just seemed, to me, I'm like, wow, well, this is a bit much, right? Then someone tells us that in the school, you, what is it? When you're outside, and they call it the yard. I'm not lying. I'm not even joking, because I was like, they called it the yard. When you're on yard time in the school, you're not allowed to hang around with more than 3 people. You cannot congregate in groups of more than 4 in the yard. I mean, if that's not something taken directly from prison, I don't know. I was like, huh? You can't hang around with more than 3 people at a time. Like, in the yard? Honestly, I'm like, this is mad. And then as they're going through and talk, so I have to ask somebody, I'm like, seems a bit much. Like, what's, why all the restrictions, etc. And the explanation that I was given was, well, this is an inner city school. Most of the kids are black and brown, probably 90% black and brown. And it was about, we need to control the kids. We need to make sure they're in an environment where they're safe and they're controlled. And I'm looking at it like, these are like 11, 12, 13-year-olds. Like, why is that the first thing you're thinking? That there's somehow savages that need to be controlled with all this routine, and we have to keep them away from each other because, like, I grew up in Birmingham in inner city schools. I know that there's problems in the schools. Like some of the schools, you can have serious violence take place. It can happen. I'm not being blind to that at all. But we should always be blaming the schools for that. That's not a kid's fault. The kids aren't the problem. The school's the problem. You have a school that's rampant violence like that, there's something wrong with the school. And not in the sense that the school needs to then be like a prison, like literally take prison techniques, but actually the school's not a welcoming environment. The school is not building a relationship between children. The school is not dealing with the things the school needs to be dealing with. If that's what's happening in your school. So just policing it like a prison doesn't change that problem. It makes it worse, right? And in fact, you're forgetting that you do all this, rigid, but they just leave the school gates and take it out there anyway. So this is the completely wrong solution to, we have some issues in inner city schools. It's actually how do you think about a school differently anyway? That's another rant. I'm just telling you, I went into the school and I'm like, it felt like a prison. The rules felt like a prison. Then guess what? I'm talking to my sister, tell her all this, and she's like, oh yeah, there's people that design prisons, design schools. I'm like, no, it can't be the case. I looked it up. It's the case. Same company that designed the school is the same company that builds the prison. So it looks like a prison, feels like a prison, kind of just is a prison, right? It kind of just really is a prison. And these are particularly, I don't know, like I said, I didn't go out to all the leafy suburb schools, but my guess is this is a thing which you're going to find in the inner city, right? Cage. I mean, there's a cage outside as well. Like properly, the way they're dealing with our kids is they're dealing with their kids like it's prison. Infractions. You're getting infractions. You got yard time. I mean, parent pay is a bit like commissary. I mean, that's the one like, look, how else are you going to get a thing? But when I put money on my kids' books, that's what it felt like. I told my son today, I'm going to put some money on your books. Commissary, right? Good behavior. Maybe they even get time off for good behavior. I don't know, man. But like, honestly, I'm in this world going, wow, this is deep when you really think about what they're doing. And again, I'm going to guess a lot of these things at inner city schools, not all inner city schools, because actually we think about schools and schools around the world. This is by no means a problem just in Britain. Schools around the world have the same thing. And actually, give you a bit of context to that, schools have always been designed by prisons. Like the idea that schools should mirror prisons is not a new thing. That is actually kind of fundamental to what a school is anywhere in the world. This is what schooling is. It's what, and I'm going to give you some white boy theory. So Irving Goffman, don't say I'm racist. I'm bringing you Irving Goffman theory, sociologist back in the 60s, 50s, 60s. And he had this theory where he said about total institutions and said that actually, if you look at a lot of institutions, hospitals will be one, asylums, prisons, schools, they're actually built on the same basic principle. He calls it the total institution. And the whole purpose is to regulate you and to regulate you in a way that you conform. So it's all about conformity, regulation, etc., etc. And it's based on prisons, comes into schools. Based on asylums, comes into schools, right? So what does a total institution do? So one of the things, he calls it binary management. Now, binary management is the idea you have staff members and you have non-staff members. So the people, think about prisons, you got the staff and you got non-staff. Separate, very separate room, don't talk to each other, don't engage. They got staff rooms, they wear different uniforms, right? That's part of the reason you have uniforms. Staff have uniforms in prison, and the inmates have uniforms in prison, and they're very, very separate. And not just separate, but staff at the top, you at the bottom. You will listen to me, you will take direction, I will give you punishment for infractions. If that's not schools, I don't know what is, right? Other than the teachers don't wear a set uniform, but they have a kind of uniform, right? Like you're supposed to go to work in certain things. But the kids all have a uniform to distinguish themselves from, to make it very clear and make that power balance very, 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 very clear, right? Binary management. Staff have the power, students don't have the power. That's one of the ways. See it very clearly. Total institution, right? Other thing they tend to do is called batch living. So you'll separate kids, the inmates in the prison, be on wings, right? A wing, B wing, C wing. They'll have cell blocks. And they'll move around the institution in these ways, right? They'll move around, have their identity will be attached to their cell block, etc., etc. What do you have in schools? My son's in a form, right? My son's in a year group, right? My son is, actually, he's in a house. He has a house. There's a house he is in the school. Identity moves around the school in these ways. That's batch living. This is about control. How do you control large groups of people? How do you make sure they facilitate moving around? And how do you keep them in identity groups so they're separate, right? Separate, easier to manage. This is something that comes from prisons and is now in the schools. Very, very clear. And as I said, not now, has always been. Understand the beast that you are dealing with, and we can start to talk. Third thing you have is what Goffman says is the inmate role. So this is very important. The inmate has a role. When you go into prison, they give you a number. You get a particular uniform. Back in the day, they shaved your head. They still shave your head, but they probably do, right? But back in the day, they shaved your head. You became an inmate. You know what an inmate does. Inmate gets up at this time. Also very, very strict times. Wake up time, closing time, this time, lunch time, bedtime, there's a role of being an inmate becomes a thing, right? What are they always telling you at school? I got how many emails I got from my son's school about being this, I won't take the school, but this kind of school student. We have the same values. It's one of the reasons that you have uniform, right? Uniform is a psychological term called de-individuation, where to control groups, you want to take away their individuality. And what's one of the way to do that is uniform. Don't have no self-expression. You're all the same. You look across, you're all the same, right? You're all in that inmate role, right? That's why they have uniform. It's not just a practical thing. This is actually a way of controlling you. So you become the inmate. You become the student. What does it mean to be a student? What does it mean to do this? What does it mean? We do this. We are managing this. Your day is like that. And you go into that and you become it, right? This is about controlling you. Just be really, really clear. Now, look, you can make the argument, schools are necessary, large groups of people, we need to control people. This all makes sense anyway. It's just practical. You make that argument as much as you like. But if you make the argument and miss the bigger point, that, yeah, okay, I guess. But actually, what is this doing and what is this telling us about what the purpose of this is? It's mostly about controlling, mostly about conformity, mostly about putting you into a role. And actually, for schools, it's actually worse in some ways. Because as an inmate, you come out of prison, you're not an inmate, right? School are actually trying to mold you into something that you then are when you leave, right? Ways of talking, ways of dressing, ways of expressing, ways of thinking, ways of being. School day, you wake up a certain time, you know what I'm saying? It's actually, in some ways, it's more insidious in the school because it's a lifelong thing. Thinking about uniform, thinking about all those things, thinking about surveillance as well. So one of the things you think about is surveillance. Like, think about your school. Like, my university is a perfect example of this, where you go into BCU and there's glass everywhere. Like, you can see everything. At all times, you can just see everything. It's not that bad in most schools, but now if you go into these new ones, particularly the glass is there. You can see everything, right? You are able to be surveilled in your classes. You are able to be, the way that it's built, and this new school I went into the other day, built on a square. So when you look down, you can see everything. It's not coincidental. Surveillance, right? Same you see with prisons. So you can always see everything's going on in the prison. Same reason. And then the fourth part of the institution is the institutional perspective. So the institution itself has a perspective. So prison itself has a perspective. That's what an institution is. Institution has a perspective. Institutions, prisons themselves, they have perspectives. They take on a life of their own. And again, schools, you make the same case, right? Schools have perspectives. Schools have values. Schools have principles. Schools have a perspective. This perspective, importantly, that you as the inmate are supposed to imbibe, supposed to take in, supposed to become, right? Again, to give you an example about university, because it's top of my head, what's our campaign we have at the minute, and unis are not exempt from this at all. Unis working exactly the same way. Is I am BCU, right? I am BCU. I am the institution. That's an institutional perspective, right? So now again, we get these things from prison. This is about carceral. This is about carceral control. Yeah, that's what I said. Forget school. The schools actually, in many ways, just mirrored prison, and now are built by the same people who built the prisons. Now, why is all this important? Because again, you could just say, "Look, yeah, nice. That's a nice talking point." You could say that's a nice talking point. Who cares? Schools or prisons, whatever. You could, but it really goes to the core of what the school system is, right? I always tell everybody, education system. It's not education. When you go to school, you're not being educated. You're being schooled, right? You're being schooled. You're being taught a particular way to be, a particular way to live, a particular way to inhabit the world, right? The knowledge you get then is also very, 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 very much controlled, very, very much sanitized. Is I want to say propaganda is not a strong word. You are getting when you do history, and it's all white history, where you learn maths and you learn that Pythagoras, was it Pythagoras? Whoever we're told did not find pi. Pythagoras' theorem was not Pythagoras' theorem because they built pyramids like thousands of years beforehand. You know, when you're taught this, you're given this really, really, really warped perspective, right? You become the inmate, the prisoner. You take on the institutional perspective of the system, and then you are spat out into the world to carry that on. That's what schools do. And in many real way, like when I said, like, I don't want my kid to go to private school or grammar school, particularly private school, is that institutional perspective is even more harsh, right? You somehow believe you are special to go to these special schools where you get this special treatment and you come out in a better way. All my days, you know I don't want that, right? I always tell everybody that the last thing we should put our faith in is school. Now, mistress, your kids should go to school. Your kids should do the best they can do. I'll be very, very making sure that my kids, all of them, my daughter just did a GCSE, she did very well. You got to get these qualifications. They're important. They shouldn't necessarily, they're important for how you move through society. So I'm not saying don't do it. Of course you got to do it. But we can't invest in them, right? We need to understand what they are, what the purpose of them is. So when you send your kid into this place, that's a hostile environment. That is a place that is trying to do something to them. And you have to make sure that we're counteracting that at all times. Otherwise, they'll fall into the inmate role, right? And we see too many of our people fall into an inmate role. This is across the world. I don't care where you are. Use the school system in Nigeria, school system in Jamaica, school system in South Africa, school system in Djibouti. It's the same, right? Unfortunately, even in the former colonies, most of these school systems are based on the West, based on their colonial masters. Most of the curriculum is based on. And even if the curriculum has changed to some degree, the thing about the total institution is more than just the teaching. It's more than just what's taught. It's actually about the whole thing that's happening to you, right? And if you think about what the top of the school system is, and where you then go into university, right? And even all these former colonial places, where are they trying to get? Where's the top universities? The elite come over here. So it's the same system. So we have to understand that when you're going to school, you're going to get the things you need to get out of it, but do not embody yourself in it. Do not let your children embody themselves in it. My child never going to come back and tell me that he is in school. Never going to come back and tell me that institutional perspective. And I'm also never going to rely on the schools. This is a conversation we have next week, actually, with Baseo twins. I ain't never going to rely on the school to provide the education that our kids need. And I think this is one of the biggest mistakes that we have made as Black people in this country. Is as you know, we've tried to improve the school, tried to change the curriculum, tried to do this, right? We've really tried. We've kind of given up on the community education. So things like Saturday school, things like community education stuff that was much, much more available, even when I was younger, isn't so available no more. Right? You just have this total institution. The school, which is based on prison, is where we send our kids and expect them to come out at the other end of it as politically engaged, politically active. It ain't gonna happen. It's not what it does. That is our responsibility, and it should. And we could never expect it to happen within the schools. The schools, Maureen Stone, Black conservative. I am certain I would have called her a coconut back in the day. But I don't agree with her on many things. But even the Black conservatives back in the day, what did they believe? Schools are colonizers. Because we got that back in the day. We understood that you weren't going to get what you wanted to get from the schools. So we really have to go back to building our own education, supporting our children, our young people, and not talking about old people too, with political education. And actual education is different. It can give them the education they need, right? That's why you got people running around here thinking that saying house Negro, coconut, is somehow should be a crime. Oh, yeah, go away with that. But that's because we haven't provided the education the way everybody needs. So actually, one of the things that me and Marcel did talk about next week is about can we put together a curriculum for Saturday schools, a curriculum for Black education, pull together some resources. So I always say this, like, if I got an idea and I want to make sure I do it, I'm going to say it publicly, I ain't got a choice. So publicly, I'm saying we are going to lead a collection of resources, curriculum and stuff people can use in community, so that we can actually start to build this out. So if you're doing stuff, I know it's already stuff out there, so I ain't trying to repeat stuff. We can share links, we can do stuff. So please do send it in. MIP@blackunity.org.uk. Send in the links, MIP at blackunity.org.uk. Send in the links, and we're going to create a resource bank where we can actually start to put that together. Use the resources, use social media, use the media, use the stuff that we have, use the connections that we have to actually build something different. Because we have to stop relying on these schools. Honestly, just go to one of these new schools. Did you do it? Who will show you? Sometimes you need to see it with your eyes and go, wow, this is what's being done to us. Wow. Not to mention the fact that we are more likely to be excluded, etc., are more likely to end up then on the school to prison pipeline, which if you're excluded from school and in a pre-referral unit, much, much more likely to go to prison, and we know this happening to our kids. So the whole path of it, there's a whole many, many, many facets of it. But the actual fundamental thing of what is a school and what does it do and what does it do to our young people, that's the problem. That's the overarching problem. And the only way to counteract that is to have our own resources, our own community education, our own places that can essentially give our kids the education they need while they navigate through that school system and tick all those white boxes, right? Anyway, so that was the rant for today. As I said, after the break, it is going to be a speech from me at Mara Hussein's trial. And it's also going to be a conversation that me and Nels had, the live afterwards. Again, really, really happy that Marie has got off. She did not deserve to be in that situation. But there is much, much more work to do. And that actually does start with education. Educating ourselves. Anybody who's sitting there thinking, oh, it should be, is coconut too high? Is it? Stop. Anyone who believes that these should be criminalized, stop. This is Black intellectual thought, right? So that's a conversation that we're going to have after the break. So thanks again for listening.